Not glorified, not celebrated, but seen like a wound that must finally breathe to heal. For years, I tried to hide the parts of myself I feared would make others turn away. The compulsions, the cravings, the unspoken rituals of lust and loneliness that I dressed in silence. I told myself I was discreet, but what I really was drowning beneath the surface of who I pretended to be. Seneca once wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." And for years, I suffered not from the acts I committed in secret, but from the belief that they made me unworthy of love, of respect, of redemption. That is the cruelest prison, not the one built by vice, but the one held up by silence and shame. When I finally said it, my obscenity deserved to be seen. I wasn't boasting. I was begging the world to let me exist beyond the performance. Because I realized, what we suppress in darkness gains power over us, but what we expose to light begins to lose its grip. The first time I admitted the truth to myself, and then to someone else, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like death, like something was dying inside me. But that death was sacred. It was the ego, the illusion, the false self dying so the real self could speak. I told a friend about my addiction, not to shock him, but to finally feel human in front of someone who wouldn't look away. I told him about the nights I couldn't sleep without a screen, about the images that hijacked my nervous system, about how I confused pleasure with connection, and in the space of that conversation, something holy happened. My shame lost its armor. It wasn't obscene anymore, it was just human. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." And what is more foolish in today's world than being emotionally honest? But I chose to be seen, not for who I wished to be, but for who I was. Because Stoicism is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. It is the courage to sit with your worst, and still choose to walk forward. The obscenity wasn't the addiction. The real obscenity was the lie I lived to hide it. When I embraced Stoic practice, not just intellectually, but spiritually, I started confronting myself. Daily journaling became a mirror I couldn't manipulate. I wrote down every trigger, every collapse, every moment I chose lust instead of presence. Not to shame myself, but to see clearly, because clarity is the first act of liberation. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't go back to pretending. My recovery didn't start with discipline, it started with vision, with honesty, with exposure. The Stoics taught that what is external is beyond our control, but our response, our will, our perception, those are ours. So I began to reframe my story. I stopped calling myself broken. I started calling myself in repair. I stopped saying I relapsed, and started saying I resisted today, and tomorrow I'll resist again. But it all began the moment I stopped running from my own reflection. The moment I whispered, then said, then shouted, my obscenity deserved to be seen. Not for attention, not for drama, but because truth is sacred, even when it's messy. Especially when it's messy. And maybe, just maybe, that's the beginning of true freedom. When the parts of you you once called obscene become the very parts of you that help others heal.